Hola Comadres, welcome to the 11th episode of Comadreando. I'm your host Marcy. This is our first episode after our baby hiatus for the holiday season. I hope you guys had an amazing holiday. And what better way to come back than bringing on my following guests? We have an illustrious guest today, and her name is Gri, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Who are you?
Hi, Marcy. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to just be a part of this passion project and this beautiful podcast that you've birthed. So my name is Griselda, I accept both. I am a mother, a wife. I am a professor of international and gender studies for the City College of New York. I am a birth doula. I've been a birth doula for almost 10 years. And with my twin sister, Miguelina, we are the Brujas of Brooklyn. It's a collective wellness platform where we focus our work of wellness on addressing womb imbalances among women of color.
All right. And then for the listeners, the way I know Gri, it's so funny. The world is so small. I started following Miguel when you guys did a curly event with Ada.
Yeah.
That was
wow.
I don't even know, that was I want to say 2006.
17. That was 4 years ago. Yeah.
So 2007. Maybe we knew each other before then. But I clearly remember I was supposed to go to that event. I was actually traveling out. I didn't get to go. But then I followed all the people that were on the panel, and I followed Miguel. And I started, listening to you guys. And eventually you guys created a series of cord cutting ceremonies. I didn't get to go to the first set of 3, but then I ended up going to the other ones. We actually saw each other there and we started talking. And then I reconnected with a friend of mine from childhood, Erica, who is actually, we're from the same town and we grew up together, but we had lost contact. So it just literally came full circle. And then after that, we're just on and off going to things together, and we're running the same circles. So today's topic is very interesting and I feel strongly about. We already kind of talked about it in a previous episode, and it's the importance of self-care as a mother and a woman. And we're also going to talk about healing and shadow work, because this is a lot of the work that I did when I was with you girls in the workshops that we did. So the reason why the topic came up is that some of the people we actually referred to it in the episode with Penny and Double D's Dating and Divorce. And then a lot of people asked me how I healed from all the trauma and all the things that I went through, post-divorce, and all the things that I brought into that relationship. So I feel like it's something that needs to be discussed, and womb health is something that I'm very passionate about as well. So we're going to start off the conversation with this. Why is self-care important? And I know this is a big question.
Oh, it's such a timely question too, because at least when we're recording this, right, Bell Hooks passed away. And for those that don't know, Bell Hooks was an author, an activist, a Black U.S. woman from the South, whose work, I think Bell Hooks has over 40 books, really touched me and so many other women of color because of her emphasis on self-care as a revolutionary act. And the reason for it is because I think it's the obvious first that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. It's that proverbial example of when the oxygen mask comes down, God forbid, if you're in a situation in an airplane where it's needed, they always tell you adults put on your mask first, and then you could put on the child's mask because you have to be sane and stable in order to help someone who is helpless to a certain extent, which is a child. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the more obvious reason why self-care is important. But then when you put certain things into context, like being women, being Latinas, being Black women, being immigrants or children of immigrants, whatever intersection your life or identities lie in, it makes it even more important because we come from people that were brutalized and whose bodies were treated inhumanely for the sake of profit and wealth building within white supremacy. And that's even more reason why for women and women of color in particular, self-care is key. I also think that self-care as mothers is very important because we give and give and give. As women, generally speaking, we tend to naturally give and be givers. But when we're a mother, that mental load is no joke. Just the laundry list of things that we're constantly micromanaging and thinking about that just adds to our load and our need to take care of ourselves. And also, lastly, because we grew up, at least I'll speak for myself and you to a certain extent, we grew up with mothers that were immigrants to a new country who didn't know or didn't have the privilege to take care of themselves. So I place self-care in the center of doing it for me and doing it for the many women in my family that weren't able to do so.
That's amazing. I want to touch on some. Sorry, I want to touch on something that you talked about, and I do see it as a privilege, being able to self-care because our parents weren't afforded that luxury. I feel like it's a luxury, but it's a necessary luxury, and it's not like it's a luxury like I'm gonna buy myself a Louis bag. It's self-care is essential.
Right.
There's no way, like we've talked about this before, me and you, and I also discussed it on the show, that you can't pour from an empty cup. If your
Right.
cup is depleted, there's no way that you can give 100% of yourself if you're not, doing the things to refill that cup. So, things as simple as, just taking time to rest. Taking time to rest is like something so simple, but our parents weren't afforded that luxury when they were here and making it and trying to raise these families. We have beautiful families, but our moms, desafortunadamente, unfortunately, they had to sacrifice themselves a lot. And I talked about this, like the image of la madre abnegada, like this mother that's just constantly sacrificing for her children and doing, and not really thinking about themselves to the point that they make themselves sick or ill. You know, with that being said, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the self-sacrificing mother. This is one of the things that my mother and I bump heads the most about after becoming a mother. My son is 7, is that she doesn't really understand how I can still, when the world was open pre-COVID and even during COVID, like go out or go on overnight trips and leave my son overnight or for a few days with his father or with her, grandmother, or even with my twin sister, to do something that for her wasn't urgent. She was like, yo nada más la dejaba a ustedes si era una necesidad. I will only leave you all, talking about my twin sister and I, overnight with someone if it was like I had to work or it was an emergency. So I've had to teach my mother also herself, while I'm doing it for myself, to reconfigure her understanding about what motherhood is, and that self-sacrificing mother is not going to work for anybody, because then we become burned out as mothers. And then oftentimes, sadly, which I know for a fact happened to me, the mothers end up taking it out on the children because they're just so utterly burnt out.
Yes.
And a little piece of them subconsciously could even believe that it's because of the children that she's so burnt out, which we know is not true. So I think that, we're getting to a better place where my mother still believes that once a woman becomes a mother, there's just a lot that's not acceptable for her to do anymore.
Yeah, it's been a journey teaching my mom as well. This is the thing. Like, I remember when Aiden first got diagnosed, I really took that role to heart. I was not leaving Aiden with anybody. I was staying home with him, and it started taking a toll on my mental health. And then
I'm sure
I decided, when his dad and I finally, went through court for custody and all that, and we set up the visitation, I took advantage and I went out with my friends and did things that a typical 20-year-old did. And my mom was, didn't understand. she was judging me, and she was like, I never went out and I didn't do this, unless it was, necessary, or, and that doesn't, that is not, that type of mothering doesn't work for me, because I can't be 100% there for my kid and give him the things that he needs if I'm not giving myself the things that I need.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you,
Absolutely.
before we started recording, you said that you went and got a massage today. So when that same vein, and using this as a segue, what does self-care look like for you?
Yes, girl. Self-care is, it's a whole list of things, from, the obvious, like getting massages, hot bubble baths, getting pampered, like going to the spa, getting a manicure and a pedicure. Self-care also, you mentioned it earlier, means resting when I need to, like asking for help, asking my husband, my sister, my mother for support if I feel like I need extra help. Self-care to me is spending quality time with my girlfriends, laughing, dancing, going out, going to trips.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care also for me is sometimes just carving out a day or a few hours in the day where I just don't do nothing. And that can mean binge watching a show, eating the foods that, I crave, but I don't eat on a regular. Just doing things that help me to disconnect my mind from the constant mental load. And the most important aspect for me about self-care is guilt, right? Is doing these things without guilt, because es otra cosa. Like, we can go get a massage, we can go get a pedicure, we can unplug and sleep in until, for mothers, for some of us, sleeping in is 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, but nevertheless, it's still more rest than we usually
Mm-hmm.
get, but with a lot of guilt. So self-care is doing things for yourself without letting guilt, like, riddle you with a sense of, like, just negativity that you can't even be present to what you're indulging in.
Another thing that I used to go through is, like, I wouldn't have the guilt in the moment. I'd be having fun. I'm out with my girls, I'm getting the massage, I'm going out for a pedicure and a manicure. But then when I came back, you know, el tumba nota, like my mother would be like, and I know she's listening to the podcast, but she's not like that anymore. But she would be like, "Oh, Marcia, how can you leave your child this amount of hours in the sitter?" And I'm just like, why not? Like, it's something that's necessary. And then the thing in working with that guilt, because let me tell you something, being raised Catholic, guilt is all we
Oh
know.
my
You know what I'm
God.
saying?
Oh my
Guilt is
God.
all we know. So from little girls, it's like, tú no puedes hacer eso. Ay, ¿cómo tú puedes hacer esto? Y lo otro. And then you're just like kind of left like, I feel bad for enjoying myself. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't be that way. Um, so I wanted to move on to the next part, is why is it important to balance between all the roles we play as women?
Why? I didn't hear the last part.
Why is it important to have a balance between all the roles we play as women?
Girl, because if we didn't, we would lose our minds. Like, for real. For real, for real. Like, it's most it's all women, just because of our socialization and patriarchy that tells us that we're not enough, but then we have to be everything for everyone. Those mixed messages really get to us. But I think when you add on the layer of being a mother, it's like that shit gets convoluted. It's almost like it gets on steroids, where we have to be present for our children, we have to be present to our mates, we have to be fully present to our jobs. And then if we have a relationship with parents, or they're helping, our parents are helping us raise the child, you have to be present to their needs. And psychologically, it can be a huge strain. And then we live in a culture where, in a developed world, my husband just sent me something today to state that in the developed world, meaning like the US, most of Europe, Canada, Australia, the US is the only country that doesn't have a federally mandated maternity leave. A private employer could give you maternity leave, or a public employer could give you unpaid leave where your
Mm-hmm.
job is guaranteed, but you don't get paid for 6 weeks. So what does that tell us? That there's not much care or concern for motherhood. And then you, on top of that, feeling the strain of needing to be all these things for everybody, it can really, really, really get to your mental health. I mean, I have mommy friends that are working through breast issues, thyroid issues, stomach issues. I mean, all these things that physiologically are an indication that we're just carrying more than our bodies are telling us that they're physically capable of doing. So literally, it is a matter of survival and about being able to live long and healthy lives. Why it's so important for us to just manage these different identities and really take care of ourselves.
Yeah, it really is. It just, at one point, as we were growing up, I really thought that that model that we saw was it. After you get married and you have children, your life is basically your children, because that's what I saw. And, being around mothers like you and other mothers that I know, Sandy, you know, I realized that being in balance is essential to being able to
Mm.
really thrive and succeed, and to be true to yourself as well. Because, we come here with a divine purpose. And yes, motherhood, I'm sure, is something that we pick out, in the Akashic records. We're like, yep, I'm going to be a mom. Um, we elect people that are going to be in our lives, but, you know, that's not all we're here for. There's like the sense of
Mm.
purpose and alignment that we need to find. And, being in balance helps you find that alignment within yourself. So I feel like it's like literally essential, and it does reflect in the body. I know you've done a lot of work with Queen Afua, and you know, it presents like you said, like in physiological issues, like illness in the body if you are out of balance. So it's important to do the work to get yourself back in balance, and to be cognizant of the fact that we can't be all things to all people if we don't take care of ourselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say that I want to acknowledge you for doing something that you may not realize, but it's a very big step. Is when you said and you affirmed that we came to be more than mothers, right? And that's big. I felt that, like I felt that in my heart, in my womb, because I know that that's a long time coming. Knowing that you and I have similar backgrounds, being Dominican, raised by Dominican mothers, and knowing Erica, the friend that we share in common, knowing that you're from where she's from, Erica and I resonate a lot because we have a lot of like nuances and with our mothers that we can identify with a lot more than our other friends, because
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, our mothers are like more campesina,
Yeah.
for folks to understand. So for you to say that, right, is very big, and I'm with you. And that's one thing that is been very, it was challenging for me to accept that that was a reality that my body was feeling. And it took years to voice that, yeah, I'm more than a mother. I mean, something as simple as if I go over my mother's house and there's food and I serve myself first and I eat, and then I serve my son after, she's like, ¿Qué tú haces? She's like, no, you serve him first, make sure he's good, and then you serve yourself. And I'm like, Mom, but I am so hungry that I can't concentrate and I can't focus. He says he's okay. Let me eat to be sustained.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I know my child is picky, so he's going to want me to make him an egg, or he's going to want me to make him arroz blanco because he doesn't want the moro, whatever it is. I know that I'm going to be tasked to do something to feed him. So let me take care of myself first. And that's something that still my mother doesn't understand. Like, how can I eat while my son is starving? He's not starving, but that's my mother being dramatic.
Yeah. Eso también. And I thought you were gonna go into like serving your husband first before yourself. So it's like the kids and the husband, and that is very taboo. I remember, I want to share an anecdote. So in el campo, we're from Jimariba La Vega, which shout out to Jima, El Ojimero, whatever. So in the campo is like literally they just got paved streets the other day. Like it's campo campo. Well, it's a little town now, but it's rural. It's very rural. So back in the day, people don't visit usually a la 12 because a la 12 is when everybody's having lunch. But it's not lunch. It's actually like dinner. You're having rice, beans, and whatever, like the main course of the day. So nobody used to go visit around that time, right? Because it's the poverty, people, they do work, but they make enough for their own family. They're not making extra for other people. So when visita used to come over, and if they happened to come over at 12, they would take the food from the kids, like la carne, para dársela a la visita.
Yeah.
They would give it to the visita. So it's the dichotomy is real crazy because you want to feed these adults that are strangers because you want to look good, but then again, like if you're a mom, you need to sacrifice yourself and not eat because you have to feed your kid or your husband. So
we had this thing, mi amiga always tell the story that in my family, I think up until maybe our late teens, early 20s, we would have family events. And it was like the dynamic was that the women would be like in the kitchen cooking or prepping the food. And the men would be off to the side playing dominoes and drinking. And then like the kids and the teens would be somewhere embullándose, tending to themselves. And then when it was time to eat, it was like the women will serve the men, either the wives will serve their husbands, or like I didn't grow up with my father, so I didn't really see that growing up, but like my mother would just start serving plates for like random men. Then the children would eat and then the women would eat. And it didn't happen overnight, but slowly but surely my sister and I were very pivotal in making this happen within our family. We were like, no puede ser that you all spend the afternoon or the evening, sweating over a stove to cook, and then you're going to be the last to eat. So now it's a free-for-all. It's like, todo el mundazo se va a parar y se va a servir ellos mismos. You're just going to get up and you're going to serve your own food. And that was challenging for a lot of the men in my family that literally never had to get up from the dining room table, because not only did their wives or mothers, right, because DR culture being machista is also very enabling for men, or their sisters serve them, but to the extent that, like, and I know you know this, Marcy, just because campo culture tends to be more traditional than if you grew up in a more urban setting. A plate for the rice, a plate for the beans, a plate for the meat, a plate for the salad. So it took a while for the men in my family to finally come to terms like, oh, if I don't get my ass up to serve myself, I ain't gonna eat. There's still some men that the women just insist on serving them. But generally, the culture of my family has changed. And I think that is what my immigration does. It does help us to change and shift the power dynamics so that women, especially mothers, are not on the losing end of this dynamic like we've tended to be.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that too, because I feel like my family has changed, at least, sorry, there's a airplane going by.
It's New York City. It's New York City.
So at least the dynamic here has changed, but we've influenced the aunts there as well. So over here, when we get together and we do like the Christmas stuff, we're kind of like, yo, get up or you're not going to eat, and still there's some men that, si vamos a una fiesta de gente que no son de la familia, they're like, oh,
yeah.
¿Cómo puedes servir un plato de comida? And I'm like, tú no te puedes parar. Tú tienes dos brazos que están funcionando. Y luego me da vergüenza. I'm like, all right, fine. Pero en ese instante, pero en realidad, like in reality, what we do is what you guys have been doing. Like basically breaking them in and teaching them like, hey, if you don't get up, you're not going to eat. And then, especially because it's a free-for-all, now the women, if the husbands don't go, they take out the plate after everybody ate. They let everybody eat first, and then whatever's left over, because they decided not to come to the party, they don't get the best meat or food. So that's on you. If you don't want to go, you're not going to get fed.
A ti te toca la espalda. You get the back of the chicken because... Even though, for my, being that, maybe because my family's campo, like my and it's interesting how this has traveled over. My cousins of our generation, they fight over the la patica, like the chicken foot, They'd be like, I got dibs. I got dibs on it. And I'm like, oh, girl, you good. You got it. That's yours. But like,
Eso es cocote. Wait, what is it? My friend called it. Wait, my friend Wendy's. I used to work with him at the bank, and he used to call it, what is it, pico y pala?
piquipala, yeah, that's like, that's the stuff that like slave masters wouldn't eat, but like the neck, the epichirri, the butt, the gizzards, la patica.
My brother talked about that the other day, and I was like, yo, like I hadn't thought about it in that context. And it's true. He's like, my grandma doesn't like pechuga. She won't eat. Like she doesn't like the mulo. She doesn't like pechuga. She doesn't like any of the, like the meaty parts. She likes all that, like
Lo
the
hueso.
gizzards and lo hueso, right? So Albert's like, esas son cosas que ustedes tienen de la trauma de la esclavitud. This is trauma you guys are carrying from slavery. And I'm like, he's like, yeah, like they didn't get to eat the good parts of
Yeah.
the animal. They got to eat whatever the masters didn't eat. And I was like, yo, it's true. So they this is still tradition. Like they still fight over that stuff. Like they make a sancocho and they're like, ¿dónde está la patica? ¿Dónde está el cocote? Y el pichiri, ¿dónde quedó?
I'm like, I'm good. I'm at my family just feels like me and Miguel are like so gringa because I'm like, oh, dame la pechuga, dame la pechuga. But yeah, my mother does not like breast. She does not understand why I like breast. Her favorite part of the chicken is the mulo. But my family is a big gallina eating family. Like they rather eat gallina than. But I think going back to the conversation about just these norms, like my husband's African American, so he grew up very Americanized, obviously, and then his mother was ahead of her times with regards to just like thinking around gender roles and what my husband was expected to do or allowed to do. So I think that being with him has been very helpful because it's also helped me to liberate myself, because sometimes he'd be like, chill, like I'd be like, hay que cocinar, hay que limpiar, I gotta do laundry, and he's like you rest, you relax, and I think that that has helped me because I'm gonna be honest with you. This is and I hope when Miguel ends up hearing this is a big like back and forth that me and Miguel get into, because I tell her like my first boyfriend of 6 years was Dominican, and then I've been with my husband now 20 years. I tell her like I don't know if something were to happen between me and my husband if I were to be able to date a Dominican man. And I know that that's fucked up because I'm making a generalization, but because I feel like no matter how open-minded or Americanized as they can be, sometimes that training and that socialization, is very hard to come by. But then I know that that's not fair because we've also been socialized to think that motherhood has to be self-sacrificing, and we're working to do away with it. But I will say that my commitment to self-care, I'll speak generally, has been relatively easier because my husband is more Americanized and he supports that. And I see that not being the case sometimes with some of my friends that are with more specifically Dominican men, because they're still rooted in the idea that like, yes, a woman has to show up and be everything for the family, and if she's not, ella una sinvergüenza.
I agree with that. So, my story. I was married to a Dominican person, and I shared this in a couple of episodes ago, like Dominican from over there. And a lot of the arguments we had was like he would tell me, "No pueden haber dos gallos en un gallinero," right? There can't be two cocks in the house. And it was because I have a very strong personality. Not that I was like not taking care of my responsibilities as a wife and a mother, but because there were certain things that he expected that I was just kind of like, you can take care of yourself. You're a big boy. So, after I ended the relationship with him, I really steered very clear of Dominican men. The person I'm dating now is not Dominican and is very kind of like your husband, like very in tune with like self-care and all that, and giving me a break and respecting the fact that I am a mother and respecting my time and my space as well. So I definitely wouldn't. I don't know. Even though I'm not gonna knock the couple of men that I do know that are doing the work to heal and are changing the expectations for Dominican men. I want to give a shout out to my brothers who have, even though my mom has tried to like ingrain that kind of like Dominicanness in them, they still fight her. Like there's holidays that they come over and she's like, tú no le vas a servir a tu hermano. And they're like, mami, we got it. Nosotros no podemos servir solo.
Wow.
Right? And then my compadre, who is such an empath and like so this amazing person. He's just, those are some of the exceptions to the rule. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that are standing out right now. But
Yes, and I want to echo a lot of that because I don't want what I just finished saying to come off as like, oh my God, Doctor, Griselda from the Brujas of Brooklyn is anti-Dominican man, because my father, may he rest in peace, was a Dominican man, had his own issues with machismo, but he allowed me to be born, right? But my brother, my brothers, but especially my brother, my mother's son, is an anomaly and exceptional with regards to breaking out of those gendered norms. Miga's boyfriend, yes, he was raised in the U.S. I mean, born in Puerto Rico, raised in the U.S. He's Dominican, but like also, a empath and very much about supporting Migue in all that she does. And they share the chores of the house. So it's not like, oh, a ti te toca más because you're a woman. You have to do more because you're a woman. So there are a lot of wonderful, beautiful Dominican men that are doing the work to reprogram themselves. So I want to shout them out. But unfortunately, generally speaking, our men, most of them are still in that thinking that yes, there can't be two roosters in the hen house because they feel like they have to be the ones in control. So this is not a Dominican man bashing episode.
yes, sorry. I mean, we can only speak to our culture because that's what we were raised in. So, if we're gonna be 100%, like this is something that we saw. It's not that we're imagining or putting down Dominican man. It's something that we did. So, changing the topic a little bit, what is shadow work? I know I mentioned it a lot. A lot of people might not know what it is. So, can we give like a definition sort of what it is? And then I can chime in about the work that I've done, and then we can bounce off of each other.
Yeah, so it seems like shadow work has gained popularity, I want to say like in the last 5 years or so, as far as its reach on social media. And it's this aspect of wellness and psychology that focuses on, generally speaking, the so-called negative aspects of human psychology and relating to one another, things like fear and sadness and anger, and more generally, really focusing on looking at the way that trauma affects our brain, affects the way that we emote or relate to one another. And I know that historically, Carl Jung, which was like a student of Freud, he's the one that really put shadow work like on the map in the Western world, because shadow work, if you look at like shamanic traditions in Mesoamerica and like, cosmologies in Western Africa and parts of Asia, pre-colonial Asia, they were very much in tune with looking at the person as a whole being and understanding. This is why one of my favorite symbols is the Yin Yang. I even have it tattooed on me. The circle with half black, half white, but there's like a white dot in the black side and a black dot on the white side to really illustrate how there's bad and good, and there's good and bad. There's shadow and light, and there's light and shadow. So our people ancestrally have been doing this for millennia, but in the West, shadow work really gained popularity with Carl Jung, looking at the way that our subconscious drives a lot of what we do. And within, that glacier, the hundreds of feet below sea level, which is our subconscious, there's a lot of trauma that if it remains unresolved, can literally run our lives. So shadow work is creating like a safe space, if you will, with a therapist, with a licensed professional, with, someone that has been doing this type of work for a long time, to then be safe enough to look at what, sexual trauma may have done to the body, or look at maybe what not growing up with a father did to the way we perceive ourselves as women, our body image, etc. It's not for the faint of heart. And my sister and I, more specifically as Brujas of Brooklyn, we do shadow work in the context of like womb wellness. And that shit is not cute because there's a lot of tears, there's a lot of processing, but it's almost like making space by looking at the heavy emotions, acknowledging them so that they don't haunt you, if you will. And then when that space is made, you can then manifest the things that you desire in your life.
Yeah, I want to touch on my experience with that with the series, because first we did a session to heal the father wound, and then we did a session to heal the mother wound, and then we did kind of like, it was like almost like reparenting. We were forgiving ourselves, right? And it was ugly.
Much better, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna count us back in.
Oh my God.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, and action. As usual, there's always some kind of technical difficulty. So I was sharing my story of participating in these workshops with Miguel and Gri, and the shadow work that I did. And okay, so let's backtrack a little. So before I went to those workshops, I had attended a full moon event with Fearless Leon, Ghislaine, who also listens to the podcast. Shout out to Ghislaine. I went to like a full moon event with her, and they brought people on. We were doing yoga, we were journaling, and I had like a breakthrough. I started crying and I could not stop myself.
Wow.
Like so deep. And there was an empath there, and she, like, out of all the women that were there, she like pointed to me and she was like, she's gonna have a transformation, that she's the one that is having the transformation right now. And literally, like, after that, I started attending the events with you girls and doing the work and going to therapy and all these other like, actually, you know what, I had been going to therapy, but I hadn't really like really pinpointed what it was that I needed to work on. And then after I went to that, I was like, yeah, I need to keep going. And it felt terrible because it's ugly. You know, you're crying, you're swollen, you're, you know, like rethinking all these things that you went through and reevaluating your choices and looking at yourself kind of like, wow, this is why, you know. And it's just, it's not a good feeling. Like afterwards, you know, after a while, but in the moment, it's dark. It's not like glitter and rainbows and, you know, all these chakras and all the colors. No, it's not all that. It's very different. But once you do the work and you can look at yourself without judgment, it transforms the way you love yourself. Because once you're able to accept yourself as a whole person, not just the parts that you think are great, you know, it completely changes the way you treat yourself, how you love yourself, how you love other people. You start to look at your interactions with other people and see how you can change your response to them. Because people are placed in your life and some people trigger you. But you don't necessarily, if you're not cognizant of why they trigger you, you keep repeating, you know, because you keep getting those same lessons until you learn the lesson. So it's like, once you learn your triggers and your reactions to certain things and why, like the why of it, it's easier to forgive yourself, you know, feel the feeling and kind of just move on from that. So I feel like that was one of the most important things. And then, you know, that workshop, the father wound was, you know, it was tough, but the mother wound one was, oh man, I remember I was like tears, boogers, journaling, doing the yoga. And then like afterwards, you know, I always remember you and Miguel always suggest drinking a lot of water to rehydrate and kind of resting and just being with yourself. And I remember I used to take that to heart, and it really did help a lot.
Mhm.
You know,
I'm really
it's,
happy.
yeah.
No, I'm happy to hear that you gained something from those experiences, for real, for real.
And then going, and then the best part for me is like being in community with women, because the way we're
Mhm.
socialized as women is not to have a community necessarily. It's like, you got to be better than her, and we're all competing for these men, and whatever, like very catty kind of. And seeing how, women can come together in that kind of space and be there for each other and nurture each other and mother each other is so
Mhm.
beautiful to see, because honestly, like when I grew up, we didn't really see that. I mean, I don't know if you saw that, but besides like our family, and even within the family, sometimes you can be kind of, not you, but people can be kind of catty and content, like have contentious relationships among women, instead of being supportive of each other and loving on each other, how we need to be loved.
No, my mother wasn't even specific with women. She was just like, don't trust nobody. Like un amigo un peso un bolsillo, yo soy tu amiga. Like it was very much about don't trust anybody. So I'm with you in understanding that, this is also part of the work about reclaiming sisterhood in a new way. And I love what you said about the way we've had to mother each other, because I, as a doula and a mother, have learned to really expand my understanding of motherhood. That, of course, mothers are the people, the women who carry life and then birth and nurture and raise children. But mothers are also the aunts and the comadres and the
Mm-hmm.
tias and the titis and the grandmas. Mothers could be a teacher that really scooped you out of the abyss and helped you get out of like the dysfunctional environment that your school may be. I know that was the case for me. So I think that in expanding our notion of motherhood as Brujas of Brooklyn, we really have been able to understand that, like, when you nurture really trusting relationships with other women, you become mothers to each other. So
Mm-hmm.
going back to Erika and I and her cousin Jennifer, and two Debbies and Damaris, like my sister and I, we've known each other for over 20 years, and we make it our business to stay in contact and see each other a few times a year, because not only are those moments safe moments where we let our hair down and some of us may drink, some of us may indulge in other vices, but we also get to unpack a lot of stuff that we may have been carrying in a space that we may not necessarily feel like doing in therapy or in formal circles like a Brujas of Brooklyn or a Fearless Leon workshop. So this is why sisterhood is so important. I mean, my sister says in Miguelina that sisterhood has saved her life, and that's definitely
Mm-hmm.
not an understatement. But yes, going back to your point, shadow work is ugly. It could get ugly, and people are like, yeah, the so-called work, and sometimes they see the end product, because healing is not linear. Like you have your moments where you peak, and then your seasons where you're down, and then
Yeah.
you peak again, and then you plateau, and then you go backwards, and you peak again, and then you go back to the valley. But I think people, especially in the Western world, we focus on the peaks with the chakras, like you said, aligned, and the lavender
Mm-hmm.
fields, and people in all white and smiling and chanting. And that is very much part of the journey of wellness and healing. But in order to get those places where we're in all white and we're smiling and chanting, we had to have what are called the dark nights of the soul, which may be one night, which may be a season. For some people, it could be a year. For some people, it could be a decade. But the moments where you literally feel like you're being dragged on your ass to look at the shit in your life that is not working, but that will not stop working until you acknowledge it. And
Yes.
lastly, with regards to shadow work, one of the reasons why it's so difficult, and you mentioned it in regards to the mother wounds, is because let's focus on the mother wound for an example. And that's what the mother wound is an aspect of shadow work, where we look at the way our relationships with our mother or the main female caretaker in our life may have had detrimental qualities that affect us to this day. And that's hard for people because it leads, or it requires for us to look at our mothers and realize that, oh shit, they are human beings. They're human beings and they're flawed. And beyond that, some of the choices they made were shitty because they're human and they're going to be flawed just like we are. And the effects of that shitty choice affected me to the point where now I'm dealing with the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, shadow work is also very much about forgiveness, because when you look at the so-called, darker or uglier aspects of who we are, we have to be tender with them, and we have to forgive ourselves and forgive our mother and our father and past lovers and siblings and whoever may have been responsible for that particular wound in our life. It's a beautiful journey. And at the end of the day, it's not an end. We don't focus on the end goal. We focus on making the journey as pleasant as possible for people.
So I wanted to touch on that, the forgiveness part. It's
Mm.
you guys said something in one of the workshops, and if they knew better, they would have done better.
Yes.
They didn't know, so that was like key in the forgiveness part, because it's easy to like hold on to resentment, or you didn't do this for me, or I didn't feel whatever it was that you didn't feel, and whatever it is that you have, these memories of your parents. But if they would have known better, they would have done better. I know that 100%, because even if it wasn't the way that you received love, they do love you, and being able to forgive them is key in like helping you forgive yourself for the choices that you made, because we're not perfect. We're human beings, and we're here in this 3D world, going through all this stuff that it's a shit show here. You know what I'm saying? But we're doing the work to heal, to be able to, get to the place that we need to be our best, highest selves.
And girl, one thing that my sister and I speak on a lot is like, and again, because I feel like you and I resonate so much, because it's almost like I know your mother, like my mother, because they're both women that come from campos. Is like, if they mothered us the way that they mothered us, can you imagine the way their mother mothered them?
Yeah.
So I've learned to extend my mother more grace and to be more patient with her on her own journey of self-discovery and forgiveness, to realize that migrating to a brand new country and raising children in this strange ass culture and still being able to have a semblance of mental health that's stable enough for them to be able to like exist on a daily basis is very commendable for our mothers.
Yes, they did such an amazing job. And let me tell you, I'm gonna give like a small anecdote. So when my mom came here, she was a teacher in Dominican Republic, and when we came over, I was 1.5. My dad was a taxi driver. He used to work at night, and dad wasn't around for a while. And when he wasn't around, she put on her big girl panties instead of crying and like being in the corner and like, whatever, doing whatever she needed to do to survive. She decided to go back to school and get recertified to be a teacher here in the States. Wow. And that takes cojones, because let me tell you something. Back in the 80s, people were not as accepting of people that didn't speak English. I remember she told me a story about a nurse. She had just given birth to my brother, and the nurse like talking crap because like she didn't speak English. She didn't understand what she was saying. And she remembers now what the nurse said. But in that moment, it was like, she had just finished birthing this child, and, she experienced a microaggression from somebody. So, them going through all of that, and the culture, like the culture, how it was in the 80s is a big thing. But they really did as much as they could, and they loved us, and try to give us the best that they could with what they had, which wasn't much at the time. Besides el trabajo, the work that they did, it wasn't as it's not as luxurious as the life that our kids have. So besides what's next for Brujas of Brooklyn? I wanted to ask that, because I know during the pandemic it's changed a little bit. I know you guys do the sadhana, which I participated in, I think a couple at the beginning. how about you talk about a little bit about the Kundalini work and how that's important, and then talk about what's coming up for Brujas of Brooklyn.
Yeah, so I would say the root of the work that we do as Brujas of Brooklyn is Kundalini Yoga, and Kundalini Yoga is a technology that has existed for thousands of years. It was birthed in on the continent of Africa, and it has really morphed into different variations. But the way we know it here in the West is it's a form of practicing yoga, focusing on breath and movement and chanting and meditation to assist the Kundalini energy to rise in our bodies. And what Kundalini energy is a divine feminine maternal energy, which is said to be the energy that God used to birth itself and birth the universe and birth the earth and create us and create all living beings. So it's energy that lies within all of us. It just lies dormant because of many reasons, particularly trauma and stress and malnutrition, for example. So in nourishing ourselves both with food, but also with sunlight and water, practicing yoga, movement, chanting, breathing, we can help the energy to rise in our body. And what the Kundalini energy does when it really rises and integrates in our body, it allows us to be more creative and to birth, because it's a birthing energy to
Mm-hmm.
birth projects. You know, this podcast was birthed with Kundalini energy. We birth human beings, which is the highest vibration of Kundalini, but you can birth projects, relationships, the way we self-express. And with that, I think what's next for Brujas is I think we're going to continuously commit to offering sadhanas on a regular basis, because more and more and more people have been joining, and more people have been asking for these 40-day practices in
Mm-hmm.
community. That has really, really, really helped a lot of people. And we're currently getting our website revamped, so we're going to have a relaunch earlier in the year, and we're really focused on offering more services. So Brujas of Brooklyn do a lot more behind the scenes than we promote,
Mm-hmm.
because part of it is self-worth, part of it is still the imposter syndrome, like not feeling like we're ready. But like, we've done many house blessings. We've had a whole ass book club with a small intimate circle of women that have done the sadhanas before. You know, we do a lot of corporate wellness work with major companies, with their employees around wellness and mindfulness. So I think
Wow.
we're going to be doing more of that, of the corporate wellness, while also promoting more of the behind the scenes work that we've been doing for many years. And generally, we're going to continue to offer beautiful, safe spaces for all people, but particularly women of color, to feel safe enough to
Mm-hmm.
come and be themselves and put their bags down, literally and figuratively, do some of the shadow work, get loved on, get mothered on, and feel their sexiness. Because that's also something that is very important for me as a mother, is to remain committed to my sexiness. And sexiness is not just the red lipstick and the tight shirt, right?
Yes.
And showing the cleavage, because sexiness exists on a spectrum. But throughout the entire spectrum is this belief that I am a sexual being. I couldn't have created my son if I didn't have consensual, right?
Yes.
Adult, safe sex. But to really make sure that I stay in tune with what that sexuality and sensuality mean to me. I'm growing more and more in tune with my own version of sensuality, and realizing that as a mother, it's very important that I fill my sensual cup up as a mother, because I have to remember that I was a woman before I became a mother. That's also something that
Yes.
I'm happy we touched on, that because of our upbringing as Dominican women, but generally speaking, women of color, there's this belief that somehow being sexy in the very traditional, like tight clothes, makeup, cleavage, let's leave it at that. Like, being sexy and being a mother are like anomalies, and they don't exist side by side.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, I feel, and a lot of women that I know will say, that we feel even sexier after becoming a mother, because we're like, damn, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I made that, I carried that, I birthed that, I'm raising that being our children. And that leads us to feel even more confident, which is a very essential part of sexiness.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of work that women need to do to kind of tap into that. And it's funny because I was like, after I did the workshops, I somebody asked me like, oh, so what did you do at this Kundalini Yoga workshop? I was like, yeah, we did a lot of breath work, we did some repetitive movements, but we also were twerking.
And we twerked.
I was like, and we
That's
twerked
right.
for a womb mode. So it's like,
Yep.
I feel like you're also a mommy chula, by the way, because we didn't mention that. But
Yeah.
when we go to the events, it's like, we let loose and kind of just reliving like the joy in the feminine, like being present in the moment and feeling joy and that sense of community really helps to move that stagnant energy throughout your body. So, I'm pro all that jazz. I love what you girls do, and not girls, women. I love what you women do, and it's just so essential. And you guys are providing a resource and something that hasn't been seen before, and it's so beautiful to see it in Black women, of Latinx women, and it's just, and even the work that you guys do about the Afro Latina thing, not thing like, I feel like you guys made it, not that you made it cool. You guys were like Afro Latinos before it was cool. Like, you guys were recognizing the fact that we are Black as Dominicans, and we come from a mix of cultures, but our culture is predominantly Black. And I know people are, there's gonna be, the traditionalists that are gonna fight me, and that's okay. And if you don't, if they wanna not listen or unfollow, that's cool too. I don't need your listens. But what I'm saying is that work that you guys do too, to tap into our spirituality and see ourselves not as these, descendants of Spaniards, which is no Spanish person that said this. Descendants of Spaniards, that it's like you guys do like a complete, it's like a full circle. I wanna say, because like the yoga practices plus the spiritual work and everything is like improving the community in all ways.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that acknowledgement. And the Brujas of Brooklyn, we are because of our ancestors and those that came before us. And I remember, so I got my PhD in sociology, and I did my dissertation, generally speaking, on like anti-Blackness in Dominican Republic. So I read a lot, and I went to DR a lot with that lens of looking at how Blackness both appears and manifests, and how it's denied in DR, because that's also an issue, that we tend to see Blackness microscopically, or rather, one dimensionally, as the way it shows up in the US, like very African American, and that is part of Blackness. But Blackness is very global. So being Black in the US is different than being Black in Ghana, like it's different than being Black in DR. But the major connection is that we are all African. We're all of African descent, and there's pride in that. But I remember learning, in my early 20s, starting my research, that because the island of Quisqueya or Haiti, where DR and Haiti currently, occupy the landmass, was the first place on this side of the world where Europeans set up like a major colony to export and import humans for the sake of like profit. That we then have to look at the fact that it was on that landmass that today is Dominican Republic, where one of the first major slave and uprisings taking place by enslaved people happened. So that resiliency and that need to affirm ourselves in the context of Blackness lies very deep, deep, deep in Dominican blood. So we are just doing what our ancestors have been doing for hundreds of years. I think that now our generation has made it cooler, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that we've made it, we've politicized it, but we've also put swag on it to really pinpoint the many aspects of Dominican culture that are Black, that are African, that we benefit from, that we love, our food, our music, our swag. Because I've been around a lot of the world, and there's Jamaica and DR are two countries that I feel like we just have like a very unique swag, that I think for Dominicans, it absolutely comes from the fact that we are African or of African descent. But I'm happy that you kind of pointed out the many things and the many hats that we wear.
Yes.
And I think that what 2022 is asking for us to do is to integrate those things a little bit more. because me and Miguel are also professors, that is our full-time job. We can't really dedicate as much time to Brujas of Brooklyn as we'd like. So we are looking to slowly wean ourselves off of academia so that we can make Brujas of Brooklyn like our main baby, because it is our baby right
Yeah.
now.
You guys birthed something amazing. And, it's just, I really admire both of you for the work that you do and the fact that
Thank you,
we're
sis.
so connected. I love it. It's one of my favorite things, and it's one of my favorite stories about interconnectedness and how, not that the world is small. It's like, you have this. What is it? What is the thing that you guys say? Like, you're like 5 connections away from somebody. So it's really interesting. And with that, I want to thank you, Gri, for being such an amazing guest and being so flexible and open and so candid with your responses. And I'm going to end the episode saying what I always say, which is follow me at Comadreando Pod on IG and follow Gri on IG at Brujas of Brooklyn. Yes. Okay.
Yes, Brujas, Brujas of Brooklyn with a J.
Yes. And if you have any questions at all, if you want me to bring Gri back, if you want me to bring Miguel on, please send me a
That'd be
Comadre-Gram.
fun.
That'd be so much fun. Send me a Comadre-Gram at my email at comadreando@escthenetwork.com or via DM. And thank you for spending time with your comadres. All
Thank
right.
you, sis. I appreciate it. And bless your podcast, and may it be fruitful and have many, 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 many episodes to come.
Thank you so much. All right. Good night, everyone. Bye.